Hi again. I'd like to continue this discussing WordPress here. And, in the last couple of videos, we set up a basic theme, put some, a few basic styles in there, included this unsemantic grid, and kind of started setting up the grid system here. And, I did the header and the footer in the last video. And in this video, I'd like to take care of this, this content area in the middle, okay? And I have 3 elements here. I have this list of pages, which eventually I want to go horizontally across. And then I have the content here, which is these posts, right? So I have these posts with everything in it. There's about 4 posts here. And then at the bottom, I have the sidebar. So what I want to do roughly is I want to have the page links take up 100% column. They want to go all the way across. And then I want the posts to be in a column that takes up 75% of the area. So it'll look something like, it'll go across like this, right? And then I want the sidebar here to take up a column that's going to be roughly 25%, so it'll be about like that on the side here, okay? And so let's do that. So how are we going to do it? Well, let's take a look at our HTML here, right? And right now I have 2 grid containers. So I got a grid container in the footer, and then I have a grid container in the header. And essentially this middle area needs a grid container to surround all that stuff, so we can apply grid classes to everything. So the grid class here, when you want to divide an area up into these grid units, you need to have a grid container. These classes don't work unless they're inside the grid container, okay? And since I closed my grid container here in the header and I closed the one in the footer, then I'll need to have another one in the middle. And the reason you could use one grid container for the whole page, but I used a separate one for the header and footer because I wanted to have that outer wrapper that was dark, right, that filled to the edges of the browser, right? So that required that I separate these into 3 different areas, right? Okay, so where are we going to start? Let's start here. So I'm right here. I'm below the header. So the header ends here. This is the dark div and the grid container for the header, and then this is where my page nav starts, right? And so I'll put a div in here, and I'll give this the class name of grid container, okay? And then I'm going to scroll all the way down to the bottom of the sidebar, but before the footer. So the footer's down here, and then this is where my grid container is going to end. So I'll put a div here, and maybe I'll mark it as div, grid container, okay? And then I'll refresh the page. Oh, there we go, right? So it doesn't look like much, but now you can see that these elements here are falling onto the grid with everything else in the header and the footer, okay? So that's pretty good. So now how do we get the sidebar to sit on the right side, okay? Well, first of all, let's actually get make sure that our page links right here, these page links go all the way across the page. So what I'll do is I'll assign these guys a div with grid 100, and I make sure I close it here, right? Okay, so let's format this a little bit so it looks nice. So there's grid 100, okay? And so that'll take up our, that'll surround our page items or our page links, right? And then now I have the loop, right? So I want the loop and everything in it, and I think I'll include this post nav links also, right? I'll include this in this column. Okay, so this is going to be the loop, and the page nav links are going to be the 75% column. Okay, so I'll add a div here, give it class name of grid 75. Right, so there's your grid 75 there. And that's right at the beginning of the loop. And then down here, right below the post nav links, I'll close that div. And let's put a little note here. Grid 75. Right, so there's our 75% grid. Maybe I'll move that over a little bit just to show that it's surrounding these elements, right? So there's my loop. And then now for the sidebar here, we'll find the beginning of the sidebar. So there's sidebar. And then I'll add a div with class grid 25. And I'm going to close this one down here, but it has to close inside the grid container, right? So I'll make sure it closes inside here, like this, and I'll give it a, you know, a little comment here to remind me that this is the grid 25. And there we go. Right, so let's save that and we'll take a look here at the results. Oh, there we go. I think that looks pretty good. So there's our footer down at the bottom. There's the header at the top. Here's our grid 75 and grid 25. And if we want to test that, why don't we get the inspector out and we'll look at the structure here. And you can see, you know, my page is made up of the body tag followed by the dark tag, which is the header. And then there's the grid container here, which is the main area. And if I scroll to the bottom, you'll see that this is the footer. It says the dark, you know, it's got the dark tag again. If I look inside there, you'll see there's another grid container, right? And you can see the grid container falls in the middle of the dark area, right? It's got some margin on the sides to kind of bring it in a little bit. And then if I look at the main container, you can see it has the same margin, so it's the same width, right? And then if I open this up, there should be a couple elements here. So here's the 100% grid, which is the page links here. And then below the page links, I have two grid columns, one 75% and one 25%, right? And they're side by side there. So the 25 and the 75 add up to 100, and they take up the whole width of the container. Okay, so there you go. That's pretty good work there for that video.